at this time, how would you describe your relationship with Apple and Pinar, since you mentioned them so much and you've alluded to it already?
I think my relationships are good. It's just that I'm not involved with them. I'm closer involved with Bill because of his initiative. I don't feel that I have any negative. Mike and I have grown further apart, but that's because he's so damn busy and has his own students to attend to and his own, history of students. He's got a lot of people out in the field in various places. And I just have not ever kept abreast of his writing, so I've never responded to his work. Now he could take that as either a judgment or that I'm not interested. I don't know, but I've just never done it. So I'm not worried about those relationships at all. I'm sort of sorry sometimes that they haven't kept up, but I think that also is, God, I'm 90 years old. Why in the hell should they still be interested in what I'm doing? Huh? I'm grateful that Bill, the two Bills attend to my work. I mean, it's nice to have that. And they were gracious in terms of inviting me down to LSU frequently.
So I don't know anything about the history of Allure or the Transcendent, the collection, the collected volume. So I have to ask, why did you select Bill for this archival collection and not Mike?
Oh, Mike has never expressed an interest in my work, in collecting it, whereas Bill has always been very responsive.
Okay.
I'm
thankful you did, obviously, but
yeah, no, Bill. I think that's the great strength of Bill. He has indeed tried to keep track of a lot of different people and their work. He helped collect Ted's papers. He helped collect Jim's papers, and I know he's attended to other people's papers. He has a real gift for doing that, and I appreciate that.
What's your hope for that? What's your hope for the archival collection?
I don't have any.
No.
I just got tired of having 30, 40 years of work up in my attic and was about to throw it out and thought I better ask him if he wanted it. So that's how that happened. I have no idea what I would have done. I probably would have thrown it out eventually. And I know Teachers College never expressed an interest in it. I'm not sure the Teachers College expressed an interest in anybody's archive. I'm sure that they have Larry's archive because of prestige, and they may have Maxine's, I don't know. But the librarian never said, "Hey, Dwayne, would you leave us your stuff?"
Do you have a strong desire for the archive to be housed with a
No.
institution or anything?
No, I don't. No, I don't. No.
Do you feel like you have any more, this is a very more broad question, not just with the archival, do you feel like you have any commitments to either institution, Teachers College or Yale, present day?
No. Not this dean. I think it was the dean before this dean at Teachers College, or president. He was turning out his either faculty notes or alumni notes or something of that kind. And I wrote a really critical letter to him. And I had been supporting him up to that point, not with a lot of money, but at least with some money. And I wrote and said, "Your material that you're sending out is so damn focused on you, and I think it's a mistake." And he wrote me back a real nasty letter, so to speak. And I thought, the hell with you. And I'm not close to, I was close to a couple faculty members in the Department of Teaching a few years ago. One of them, in fact, was my student, for whom I had a great deal of respect. And in the first years at Yale, I would occasionally stop in because there were enough people there that I knew, but I wouldn't think of going back there because I don't know anybody in the faculty anymore. Again, it's been 30 years that I've been away, so. I've been away longer than I was there, because I was there 25 years. And I've now been away 30-some years, 32 years or something like that. So that's almost 2 generations. In fact, one of Mike's students was on the faculty there at one time, and one of Bill's students was on the faculty at Teachers College for a while. So she didn't last, and I don't think Mike's students lasted either. No, I don't support either of those institutions economically.
Okay.
I support the University of Chicago.
Okay.
I support, not major support, I mean, I give to their annual fund. I support the University of Wisconsin. I support my two daughters' undergraduate colleges. And that's it. And both of them I have great respect for. They're quite different institutions. One is Bard College, and I think Bard College is a top-notch college, just one of the best in the country as far as I'm concerned. And I would give anything to make sure that that continues under the Botstein is getting old, so and it doesn't have much money, so I hope it continues to make it. Whereas my oldest daughter went to Gordon College. Do you know Gordon? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's in your area up there in Massachusetts, up north of Boston. Not north of Boston, south of Boston. In the Boston area, at least. I forgot the name of the town.
Is it a div school? Is it associated with the
Gordon College.
Yeah, does it have a div school?
No, but there is a Gordon College. There is a Gordon something.
Right, I'm familiar with that.
Gordon Conwell.
Yeah. Okay,
they're not related.
They're not related.
No,
Okay, so
I don't know where the name Gordon came from in that context,
okay.
but they're not associated.
Okay,
but Gordon, I was taking my daughter in her junior year or maybe senior year, looking at colleges, and we were coming back from and this is during the time of my family breakup. We were coming back from a college in Pennsylvania. I don't remember which one. One of the fairly good ones, not one of the top ones. And she got in the car and said, "Dad, I really just want to go to a good Christian college." And I don't know why Gordon stood out in her mind, but Gordon is a reasonably sound Christian college in the tradition of, what would I say, a little bit evangelical, not too. It isn't. I'm not sure what religious tradition it comes out of, but they did a good job of integrating religion into their work, and at the same time did a fairly good job with their academics in other areas. And my daughter had a really good course in the Old Testament by somebody who has written, our father Abraham, I don't know, do you know him? He wrote that. And so she has a lot of respect, and I have a lot of respect for the integrity of the institution. I am not normally inclined to support religiously oriented colleges, but they can be very good. I wouldn't have anything to do with some of the extreme right colleges, although my other family's daughter or son is thinking of one of them, but damn it. So I think both of those institutions are supported. But there's no need to support Yale. Yale has a lot of money. And I'm not sure Teachers College is worthy of support in terms of my interests. They're doing I think they're trying to do a good job of improving schooling, but they have lost the ability to reflect historically on what they're doing because they no longer have much in history or philosophy. They have one person in philosophy now that Maxine is out of it, a guy from the University of Chicago who does an interesting thing. But I don't know what they're doing historically. And that's a problem with the professional school,
What impact did you have or influence did you have over your children's education? I mean, you obviously live in the...
Well, we when the kids were born, we were in Manhattan. And we were, you don't know Manhattan, do you? Okay.
Not very well. I mean, I've been there, but...
All right. I was in a new housing development when I was married, north of the main Columbia campus called Morningside Gardens.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it is 6 22-story buildings. with, at that time, lots of families. And my wife at that time was a real community networker. And so she and her other mother friends and father friends too, to some extent, built their own parent-centered play group, which eventually became a nursery school. And when it came time for the kids to go to school, elementary school or kindergarten, I was aware that the New York schools in our area, not only in our area, were problematic. And I had known, because of my work at Teachers College as a principal, had known that many of the union faculty had tried to help integrate the local school by sending their kids to the public school. And it was a devastating experience for them. And we were not willing to sacrifice our kids to that end, which, is both a shortcoming, but you weigh that quite differently. I happen to have been not the doctoral advisor, but very involved in the doctoral work of two people, one of whom took over a private school in Manhattan and tried to turn it into a more progressive framework. And by the time my kids were ready for school, he had made significant changes, and it was a really good potential private school. And there were a lot of private schools in New York that I could have chosen, but we chose this because I knew the headmaster and knew that I would have some influence on him. And I was eventually on the board of trustees of that school, and ended up being the person who chaired the committee for the next headmaster. It turned out to be a headmistress who was also a really good progressive educator. When we made the decision to leave, when I made the decision to leave Teachers College and leave New York, and I did partially for economic reasons. So the last year in New York, we took the kids out of school in part because we could no longer afford it. It's at that point where inflation was really going up, and the inflation in private school tuition was going up tremendously. So I resigned from the board and told them why, but made the arrangements that both of my kids could attend certain kinds of activities in that school. Both my kids had a couple outstanding elementary school teachers. In fact, both of them were shaped significantly in terms of their interest in education by that private school. That private school today is one of the best progressive schools in New York City. Not because I had anything to do with it, but the tradition was established. They also have children of really well-known, wealthy parents, which makes it possible to be progressive, unfortunately. When we moved to Connecticut, I looked for a community that had a good school system, but I didn't know how to find it. So we took sort of a chance talking with a few people about where we moved. And I did not move into New Haven partially because of the schooling situation there. The educational the quality of the education was mixed. There were some very good things in that school, some very bad things. My youngest child had just an absolutely miserable 5th grade teacher, awful. And her next teacher was very good. And both in the junior high school and in the senior high school, it was a mixed bag. But we had a good year homeschooling in my last year in New York. I taught the kids animation, and we worked in the dark room. My wife took them whale watching. We did the museums in New York. It was great. So,
how did you respond to bad teacher experiences on their part? Their teachers.
I didn't get involved for probably two reasons. The major reason being, having shifted totally fields, I was consumed by my work, and so I tried to support my daughters and also tried to stay in touch with the teachers. After the first year, I wasn't even aware that it was that difficult on my daughter until later in some ways. But the next teacher she had was great, and we were not close, but at least very supportive. And I don't remember too many of the high school teachers. That also was a mixed bag. There were some very good things and some average things.
You said for two reasons. You named one.
Oh, the other was that I'm not sure that I could have done anything. I didn't know enough about the structure of the school, and I wouldn't have known how to proceed. I would have been threatening, it seems to me, to go to a teacher, and I don't know whether my wife handled anything or not. I have no idea. She may have, because she was really involved in the schooling of the kids, and she may have been dealing with that. The other thing, it was either the first year, this was the second year there, we had a Scandinavian exchange student living with us. And there were enough good things in the neighborhood and enough reasonable things happening in the church communities that I wasn't overly concerned. I mean, they weren't bad schools, they weren't great schools. And my daughter had no trouble getting into Gordon Conwell, not that would have been any trouble. And Bard was on its way up. It's I think rather difficult to get in at the present time. But they were constantly bringing under question the admissions requirements there, and were experimenting with other ways of doing it, which they're still doing, incidentally. One of the things they do now is to send out a note and suggest something like 5 topics. And the students then can do a research paper on one of those 5 topics and submit it as their entrance. They don't pay any attention to the exams or anything of that kind. But if the paper truly shows talent, they will accept it. My daughter did somewhat the same thing, but it was totally different. They had an open interview situation. You submit your materials, and then you go up for an interview, and at that time with the interview, they say yes or no. My daughter came out of the interview and said, they accepted me. You know, it was really unusual, gutsy as all get out. But that was characteristic of Bard. It was a gutsy institution. It still is a gutsy institution. They brought the students in for 4 weeks before the term started and had a special class for all students on thinking and writing. And they learned to write. If they didn't know how to write, they learned to write before they began their courses. And it was my daughter, my youngest daughter, is a superb writer, particularly in terms of her professional work. She has prepared speech points for Hillary Clinton and people in the administration. You know, she's really, and she acknowledges that Bard, her experience in Bard was responsible for that. Plus the fact that her advisor, who was a Russian specialist, helped her develop her skills in writing her bachelor's thesis.
And your refrigerator is decorated in photos of grandchildren and both of your daughters and so forth.
Yeah.
Are you close with them?
Yeah, reasonably close, given the fact that we're so far removed, you know, spatially removed, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm reasonably on close terms with all of them. Not as close to my older daughter intellectually because of their theological restrictions, so to speak. I mean, I don't share their evangelical orientations, and so we tend not to talk. But I don't talk with my daughter either about that. We talk about other things. But
Some different subject. You are going back to the archival collection to a degree. You have published, Bill helped publish with your permission, the collected volume, Lord of the Transcendent. There's also in the archives letters of people requesting your presentations to distribute, and your response is no, that they're not read. This is not for public.
I think that's because they were presented as as speeches, and they were not necessarily written then for public dissemination.
Correct. So, recognizing that, then we come to now, and you sent the papers on to Bill.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to rewrite them.
Okay.
I don't.
Do you mind if they get published?
No, I don't mind if they get published now. I don't care. There are some that really need a lot of work. I hope that some of the early stuff, particularly the drafts that I think I did in '64, are sort of weak. But no, now they have historical value in terms of the way a mind was shaped and developed. So I don't,
And with editing, what type of edits do you think they need?
Well, I certainly hope they correct any grammatical errors. I don't think they can do much with the substance. Yeah. No, that stuff is historical, and I'm not going to mess up a historical record.
Okay.
I regret that I didn't write better and write more extensively and write more, but I didn't. Oh, yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've researched you quite a bit this past few months, and that self-criticism has arisen several times in different platforms you've been
in my work
reflection, that you didn't write well, that you were being able to write well and publish more and so forth.
Yeah.
Do you think that's your greatest Achilles heel and that kind of stuff, where it's one thing that you wish you would have been better about?
Oh yeah, I regret that I was not formed at the college level and at the graduate level as a writer. And I'm very much aware of that, in part because of what happens here at the dip school, and the way my wife really expects written work and critiques it, helps them if they have trouble. And I don't remember getting any tutorial help in writing by any professors any place along the line. That's one of the reasons writing my dissertation took so long. I don't remember. They were not, also, nobody that I worked with at Wisconsin were writers. So Virgil never wrote very much. And we were not necessarily encouraged to think in terms of a scholarly kind of thing. Virgil's emphasis was, can we think differently about what we're doing, not can we write to make a point. And we were supported for our, not necessarily novelty, but at least our, starting to offer alternative ways of conceptualizing this. Not that he did it himself, but he certainly accepted the significance of that. But no, I regret that I was not better formed as a scholar in my doctoral work. And I'm not sure that I did that either for my students. I don't remember emphasizing the writing so much as I emphasized the thinking. And I realize there's a relationship between thinking and writing, but it wasn't so clearly identified in my mind as a scholarly activity, which is a deficiency within the history of the curriculum field.
Well, from my experience with especially professors, students now, probably the same thing in the 90s and 80s, suffer from lack of writing skills as overall.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah. Well, I think that's true, but I don't really know because I'm not that widely enough experienced with that. When my first several years at Teachers College, and we, our major sources of income as well as our major work was the summer work with teachers who would come back for their degrees, work for their degrees, which is another problem within education, the structures of education. But one of the things that we had, because the South, from Virginia on down, did nothing to educate black teachers. And the black teachers would come up to Teachers College with only 2 years of, say, normal school training. And their writing skills were horrendous, just really bad. We had to deal with elementary school quality writing at the college level, and recognizing that they were not being supported in the South. What do you do with that? You support them, and because that was the reason for trying to bring about some developments in the improvement of education in the Black South. And that was true then. That epitomized the problem. But that was also true. Other people would come to Teachers College hoping to become better teachers, not to become scholars. And that was our focus. Yeah.
Yesterday, you referenced Parker Palmer's work with the stranger.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about Parker Palmer, and are you familiar with A Courage to Teach, which came out in the 90s?
Yeah, but I haven't read it.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts?
Parker and I were members of the adjunct faculty at Auburn Seminary for several years. And that's when Parker was Dean, I think the title was Dean of Studies at Pendle Hill. Do you know Pendle Hill? Mm-hmm. Pendle Hill is the Quaker retreat center outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
A major Quaker source. And I need to go back to explain this Auburn Seminary. Do you know Auburn Seminary at all?
A little bit, yeah. I mean,
well, you know, it's the Presbyterian element in Union Seminary.
okay.
It's not a full-fledged seminary. It does not offer degrees. It served as in a sense, the advisory arm for the advising of Presbyterian students at Union Seminary. Auburn Seminary was originally up in Auburn, New York, and I don't remember when, I think probably in the 20s, maybe in the 30s, came down and affiliated with Union, basically because Union provided a space for it. It was a continuing education arm of Union Seminary for a long time, and the person there were two people who did that, but the last one was Bob Lynn. Do you know the name Bob Lynn?
Maybe, but...
Well, Bob Lynn was the religious educator at Union Seminary along with Ellis Nelson, and was an extremely fine administrator, and they wanted him to become dean of Union. He didn't do it, and he eventually became the major director of religion for the Lilly Foundation, and well known within that field. He also then chaired the search committee for the new president of Yale because he was a graduate of Yale. Bob began to change the nature of the program at Auburn Seminary, and had as one of his colleagues, junior colleagues, a woman by the name of Barbara Wheeler. Do you know the name Barbara Wheeler? Okay.
Christian education is not my strong suit.
Yeah. Well, she's a religious educator and is one of the two most influential people in terms of theological education in the country.
Really?
Oh, extremely well respected. I had Barbara married late when I first knew her. I didn't know her well. She was simply an assistant to Bob Lynn. And I was working as a teacher of the TAs at Union Seminary. One of my first or second classes, I had Sam with her, who was a Catholic priest who had been educated in Rome, was going for a doctorate in Old Testament, took this course with me, and I apparently made a real impact upon him, because he and Barbara, not because, but I mean he and Barbara eventually got married. When Bob left Auburn Seminary, the board of directors appointed Barbara, who did not have a formal degree in theology, as the dean of Auburn Seminary. And Barbara, new in the field, decided that what she needed were a group of colleagues who could help her think about theological education in different ways. And because of Sam Sam said, you ought to get to know Dwayne. You ought to get to know Dwayne. So she invited me to serve on the Auburn faculty, which was an adjunct status. We would meet 3 times a year. Parker was one of them. Walter Wink was another, and I had already known Walter from other ways. Jim Forbes, the minister at Riverside Church and homiletician at Union Seminary, and Larry, the ethics, let me see if I can, Larry Rasmussen, in theological ethics. And the 6 of us would get together 3 times a year and spend all day talking ideas. He was part of that. Parker was part of that group. One of the things that happened in that situation is that, and I had worked with I had worked with Walter on the revision of his first book, no, his second book, not his first book. And I said, Walter, you have to totally redo it, and he totally redid it. And I worked with him on many of his volumes then, in some ways. Barbara said, Dwayne, you know a lot about teaching. Walter knows a lot about Bible. He doesn't know much about teaching. You don't know much about Bible. Why don't we put the 2 of you working together? So we would, for several years, almost annually, we would offer a 1-week course based upon Walter's book on teaching the Bible. I don't remember the title of it. The first book was Transformation of Bible Study. The second one was the Bible and Human. No, the first one was Bible and Human Transformation. The second was the Transformation of Bible Study. And so he and I would teach regularly. And for the first 3 or 4 years, we would go down to Pendle Hill, where I got to know Parker reasonably well, not in a friendly way, but reasonably well. Parker left there because he wasn't totally satisfied that. Parker had a really good education. He was a sociologist, and a really good one. And he was going through some depression problems and went through a divorce. And he hadn't been writing much. He hadn't written much at all before then, and he realized that his calling was to writing. So I did not know him when he was writing his books. I did not know him when he was writing The Stranger or the other book. And I haven't stayed in touch with him, but yes, I did know him quite well. And I do know the work, and I have great respect for the work, but I don't know it in detail. Yeah.
How has your faith theology, your own personal faith and theology, grown over the years? And has that change, or theology itself, affected you?
Why do you... I'm not sure why you combine those two.
With what? Faith and theology? Mm-hmm. Why do you resist the combination?
Well, there are different realms. That's why.
I do not combine them intentionally myself. I would just didn't know which word spoke to you the most.
Okay. Well, they're 2 different domains, as far as I'm concerned. Theology is indeed an intellectual activity by which we, in a sense, if you want to, give form to faith. I'm not sure that I like that expression, but that's certainly one way it's talked about. I'm not totally comfortable with the word faith, I guess, and I think I've written on that someplace. I know I've written on that someplace, in fact. Oh. I was brought up, in a religious home to some extent. My mother was more religious than my father, and we attended the Methodist Church regularly. Once I left home and went into the Army, I did not bother to go to church, and I would not necessarily have seen myself as religious. I became interested in religion, not necessarily from a faith point of view, in terms of my own personal experience, but intellectually, when I began teaching at Northern Illinois, although I was going to the Presbyterian Church at that time, because I liked the preacher. And it was at that time that I was also beginning to stop at the University of Chicago bookstore. And I remember, as I said, picking up Tillich and picking up Buber and Fromm, The Art of Loving, and a variety of other things. So I became aware of that. I probably also was beginning to read mystical literature about that time. I'm not certain of that. I'm sure that having read Buber, I was beginning to read Jewish, the Baal Shem stuff, and Buber's stuff, collection of the Baal Shem. And I'm not sure when I began to read Evelyn Underhill or when I began to read Meister Eckhart. My most profound experience in a sense of, I'm not sure I would call it the religious dimension, but the mystery or the unknownness that accompanies human beings. In my first or second year of teaching, and it may have been my first year of teaching at Teachers College, we had all of the elementary school staff, I think there were at least 5 of us, spent Saturday morning teaching about 120 students. We had a lecture hour, and then we broke into small groups, kind of thing. And I don't know if it was the first time I taught, because I developed fairly good lecturing skills at Northern Illinois, teaching beginning psychology, or maybe educational psychology, I don't remember which. But I remember it still has emotional ramifications for me. So hold on for a minute here. Turn it off.